The Whitmore estate sat quietly beneath a slate-colored sky, the rain lightly tapping against its tall, cold windows. Inside the living room, the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Shadows stretched across the hardwood floor, the fireplace offered little warmth, and the silence between the gathered family members was loaded with suspicion. Clara adjusted the hem of her black dress, crossing her legs with surgical precision. Her red nails tapped rhythmically on the leather armrest of the antique chair, betraying her impatience. Luke sat slouched in the corner, one booted foot resting on the coffee table. A beer in hand, his eyes already tired of this. Megan, smaller and gentler in demeanor, looked down at her hands, clearly trying to avoid the tension building like static in the room. And then there was Evan. He sat at the far end of the room near the French doors that led to the garden posture, stiff hands folded tightly in his lap. His modest gray suit made him look like he didn't belong, though the truth was more complicated than that. He wasn't blood, but he was family. At least that's what Richard had always told him. Mr. Kaplan, the family's attorney for nearly 3 decades, stood in front of the stone fireplace, a legal envelope in hand. His presence was stiff, formal, and well-practiced. He cleared his throat and the room froze. "Your father," he began, "wished for this to be read with all of you present in this room, the one he loved most." Clara straightened up. Luke exhaled heavily. Megan looked like she might cry again. Mr. Kaplan broke the seal. "To Clara, my firstborn," he read aloud, "I leave my wedding cufflinks, the ones worn the day I married your mother. You always admired them." Clara blinked. That was it. "To Luke, my son, I leave my fishing gear and the Vermont cabin. May it bring you the peace you never found." Luke laughed under his breath. "Jesus," he muttered, shaking his head. "To Megan, my sweet girl, the Steinway piano in the music room. May music always find you when words cannot." Megan frowned, not sure whether to feel touched or offended. Then Mr. Kaplan paused. "And finally," he said, "to Evan Ramirez, whom I raised as a son for 18 years. I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes Whitmore and Company, all bank accounts, real estate holdings, investment portfolios, patents, and remaining personal effects not listed above." For a moment, no one breathed. Clara blinked. Luke sat up straight. Megan dropped her gaze. Even Evan looked stunned. "I'm sorry," what Clara asked, standing slowly. Her voice sliced through the room like a scalpel. Mr. Kaplan repeated himself calmly, but the words now sounded sharper. Luke leaned forward. "So he left the empire to the kid he pulled off a playground bench when we were in high school." "That's not fair," Megan whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Evan looked up pale. "I didn't know," he said quickly. "I had no idea I thought." "Oh, spare us," Clara snapped. "You expect us to believe you had no clue this was coming." "I didn't," Evan started, but Clara cut him off. "You lived in this house. You had dinners with him while we were chasing internships and degrees. He gave you everything, and now he's given you what's left of us." Luke stood up, beer still in hand. He gave his whole damn name to a charity case. "Don't say that," Megan said quietly, her voice cracking. Clara stepped closer to Evan, her expression glacial. "You don't belong in this family," she said, "and you sure as hell don't belong at the head of it." Evan didn't respond. He couldn't. Every part of him wanted to melt into the floor. Mr. Kaplan looked at each of them, then slowly closed the folder. "Everything is legal, notarized, witnessed. I understand this is difficult, but the will stands." Clara looked back at Evan one more time, her voice low but fierce. "You're going to give it back. All of it. One way or another." The house didn't empty after the will was read. If anything, it felt more crowded with silence, tension, and the ghosts of conversations left unsaid. The Whitmores didn't scatter, they circled. Later that evening, Clara stood at the wet bar in the dining room pouring herself a glass of scotch. Her hands didn't shake, but her jaw clenched tight as stone. Megan sat at the kitchen table nearby, untouched tea cooling in her hands. "You know what I hate most," Clara said finally? "He didn't even have the guts to tell us himself." "He probably knew we'd react like this," Megan replied quietly. Clara turned to her eyes sharp. "This isn't a reaction, Megan. It's a betrayal. He raised us. He told us one day this company, this family would be ours. And now it's Evan." Megan didn't respond. She looked down at her mug. Meanwhile, upstairs in the guest bedroom, Evan stared at his reflection in the mirror. His tie was off his shirt, half unbuttoned. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in a day. There was a soft knock. He opened the door to find Luke, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Just wanted to see if you've started moving your stuff into Dad's office yet." Evan exhaled. "Don't do this, Luke. I didn't ask for any of this." "Yeah, but you sure as hell aren't saying no, are you?" "What do you want me to do, burn the papers?" Luke stepped closer. "I want you to admit it. Admit you played him. You were always there, always in his shadow. Maybe you waited for him to get old and stupid so you could—" "That's not true," Evan snapped. Luke chuckled bitterly. "It's not about blood, right? That's what you'll say. Family is about love and loyalty and all that bullshit. But guess what? You're not one of us. You never were." He walked off before Evan could respond. Downstairs, Margaret, the late Richard's second wife, sat stiffly in the study. Mr. Kaplan entered, still holding the briefcase from earlier. "I assume you're here to contest the will," he said flatly. "I want to know if he was of sound mind when he signed it," Margaret replied. "6 months ago, Richard forgot my birthday. That man never forgot a date, not in 20 years. Mr. Kaplan frowned. Legally, he passed all competency evaluations. "But if you have medical records—" "I have memory tests," she said, producing a folder. He started forgetting small things. People's names, places, and then he rewrote everything. "Doesn't that seem convenient?" Kaplan sighed. "Convenient, yes. Illegal, harder to prove." Back in the living room, Clara joined Megan again, dropping into the chair opposite. "I am hiring someone," Clara said, "a forensic accountant, maybe even a private investigator." "Clara, I'm serious. Something's off. Why did Dad suddenly decide to rewrite everything for Evan? What happened 6 months ago?" Megan swallowed hard. "You think Evan manipulated him?" "I think he's hiding something, and I think Dad was too." That night, Megan crept into Richard's old study. She looked through drawers, old journals, ledgers. It was all business until she found a locked box in the bottom cabinet. Inside letters, dozens of them, all addressed from a woman named Elena R. from California. Most were dated 2 decades ago. One envelope, newer than the rest, caught her attention. It was never opened. The handwriting was shaky, almost unrecognizable. "I never told him. He doesn't know I'm dying. But if I don't write this, you'll never know either. Evan is your son. Not legally, not on paper. But by blood, you know it. I know it. I didn't say it then because I was scared you'd hate me. You were married, I was alone. But maybe it's time. Give him what you couldn't give me." Megan stared at the page, her mouth dry. A storm had just started outside. Lightning flashed, illuminating the dark, glossy frame above Richard's desk, a family portrait with Evan off to the side, barely visible behind Clara's shoulder. It had always been like that. The next morning came with a strange, uneasy quiet. The rain had stopped, but the air hung heavy like the house itself was waiting for something to snap. Evan sat alone in the garden nursing a black coffee, his eyes fixed on the damp stone path ahead. His phone buzzed, lighting up with a message from an unknown number. "We should talk. I think I know why he changed the will." He looked up toward the house. Through the dining room window, Megan stood at the counter, eyes meeting his for a fleeting moment before she turned away. Inside, Clara was pacing the living room with her phone to her ear. "Yes, Richard Whitmore. Date of death, June 12th. I need all legal filings attached to the most recent revision of his estate plan." Pause. "No, I don't care about privacy regulations. I'm his daughter." She hung up in frustration. Her voice wasn't the only one rising in the house. Luke down the hall was arguing with Margaret. "What exactly were you doing when he rewrote the will?" he hissed. Margaret crossed her arms. "You think I knew if I had? Don't you think I would have fought him then?" Luke scoffed. "Maybe you wanted Evan to get everything." Margaret's jaw tightened. "Don't be ridiculous. You always treated him like the golden boy." "I treated him like a human being, something your father had to learn how to do with you." Luke's face darkened, and for a second it looked like he might say something unforgivable. But instead he turned and stormed out. Later that day, Megan called Evan and asked him to meet her at the local library. It was the only neutral ground she could think of. When he arrived, she led him to a private reading room and shut the door. "I found this," she said, pulling out the unopened letter she'd read the night before. She handed it to him silently. Evan opened the envelope with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the handwriting once, then again. He sat down hard in the chair, as if the weight of the words physically struck him. "She's my mother," he said finally. "I always wondered why she left me at the shelter. They said she was sick, but she never told me who my father was." Megan sat across from him. "You're not just adopted," she said gently. "You're Richard's biological son." "I never wanted this," Evan whispered. "The company, the house, I just wanted to belong somewhere." Back at the estate, Clara was deep into her private investigation. She met with a retired forensic accountant who once worked with their father's firm. There's a 6-month window where Richard liquidated 2 personal investment accounts and moved funds into a trust, the man explained. "What trust?" Clara asked. "One that lists Evan as the sole beneficiary." Clara narrowed her eyes. "And no paper trail?" "Minimal, almost as if he wanted to hide it." Clara leaned back, processing. "You think Evan pressured him?" "I think someone did." That night, a family dinner was called one of Margaret's efforts to mend the air, though everyone knew it was a performance. The table was long and full of untouched plates. No one spoke until Clara finally set down her fork with a sharp clink. "Do you want to tell us, Evan?" she said. "Before I do." Evan looked up. "Tell you what?" "That you're Richard's son, by blood. I assume you read the letter." Luke blinked. "Wait, what?" Megan glanced between them, her throat tightening. Evan nodded. "I read it." "So this was your endgame all along," Clara said. "First the will, now the bloodline. How convenient." "I didn't know until yesterday," Evan said. "I swear to God, Clara." "Oh, please," she snapped. "You played the long game. You were patient, you were strategic, and now you have it all." "I didn't ask for this," Evan shouted. "You think being the bastard son of Richard Whitmore is some kind of prize?" The room went dead silent. Margaret stood her chair, scraping loudly behind her. "We've all lost something," she said coldly. "But if you want someone to blame, look in the mirror. All of you." She walked out without another word. Clara turned to Evan. "I'm going to court, DNA or not, this isn't over." He met her gaze calmly, almost sadly. "Then I guess it never will be." The courtroom was cold not in temperature but in tone. It had the sterile, unforgiving atmosphere of a place where feelings were irrelevant and facts were sharpened into weapons. Clara Whitmore sat at the plaintiff's table dressed in a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled into a tight knot, every movement calculated. Her legal team flanked her like armor. Across the aisle, Evan sat beside Mr. Kaplan, visibly tense but composed. He wore the same suit from the funeral, a subtle sign that maybe he hadn't planned for any of this. The judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and piercing eyes, glanced at the files before her. "We are here to determine the validity of Richard Whitmore's most recent will," she began, "and whether undue influence or diminished capacity played a role in its creation." Clara's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, our case will demonstrate that Mr. Whitmore suffered cognitive decline in the final year of his life, decline his immediate family witnessed firsthand. We will also show that the defendant, Mr. Ramirez, was uniquely positioned to manipulate that vulnerability." He turned toward Evan. "Raised in this house, yes, but not blood, not legacy." Evan didn't flinch, but inside he felt like sinking into the floor. Over the course of 3 hours, witness after witness was called: the family physician, a former housekeeper, even Richard's old business partner. Most spoke of Richard fondly but acknowledged subtle signs of confusion in the months before his death. Then came Margaret. She sat stiffly as she testified. "I saw him misplace keys, forget appointments, repeat stories. It started small, but by last fall it was getting worse. He'd call me by his first wife's name." Clara's team leaned in triumphantly. But when Megan was called, things shifted. "Did your father ever mention changing the will to benefit Evan?" the attorney asked. Megan hesitated. "Yes," she said finally. "He told me Evan had earned it. That blood didn't mean anything to him if love and loyalty weren't there." The courtroom murmured. "And did he seem confused when he said this?" "No, he was clear, probably clearer than I'd seen him in years." Evan watched her stunned. Megan didn't look back. When Evan was called to the stand, he spoke softly but firmly. "I didn't know I was his biological son, not until after he died. I didn't ask for the inheritance, I didn't manipulate anyone. But I did love him. He treated me like I mattered. That was new for me." Clara's lawyer leaned forward. "And yet you accepted the fortune." "I did at first, then I tried to give it back." "You expect the court to believe that?" "I offered to split it equally. Clara refused. Luke threatened me. Megan Bean was the only one who asked me how I felt." The judge called for a recess. Outside in the hallway, Clara approached Evan alone. "You think this is noble, standing there like some accidental hero? You're still the mistake he tried to hide." Evan turned to her, eyes steady. "And you're still the daughter who spent her whole life trying to earn what he never knew how to give." Clara's mouth twitched almost like a wince. She walked away. Back in session, the judge returned to the bench and adjusted her glasses. "This court finds that while Mr. Whitmore may have experienced signs of early cognitive decline, there is insufficient evidence to deem the will invalid. His statements, both verbal and written, suggest intent. The will stands." A single gavel strike echoed like thunder. Evan exhaled shakily. Clara sat frozen. Luke cursed under his breath. Megan closed her eyes in something close to relief. But it wasn't over. That night at the estate, Evan gathered the family in the living room not by invitation, but by necessity. "I'm not keeping all of it," he said. "I don't want a company built on resentment. I'll stay on as interim CEO, but I'm dividing my shares between all of us, equally." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Is this guilt or strategy?" "Neither," Evan said. "It's clarity." And what about the truth, Luke asked, about being his real son? Evan looked down. You can carry that like a weapon if you want. I'll carry it like a wound. Megan reached out, placing her hand over Evan's. You're not the outsider anymore, she said. If anything, maybe you were the only one really in. No one spoke for a while. The fire crackled quietly. Rain returned, tapping gently at the windows like the house itself was ready to breathe again. Weeks passed. The media storm died down. The legal noise faded into background static, and the Whitmore estate, now legally Evans, sat still and waiting as if uncertain what came next. Inside the house, the walls echoed differently, not with silence but with absence. Clara hadn't returned since the court ruling. Her calls to Megan were short, polite, businesslike. She hadn't spoken to Evan at all. Luke moved back to Vermont claiming he needed space, though most suspected it was just pride. Margaret was packing to leave for Arizona where her sister lived. The house that once held too much tension now had too much room. Megan remained. She'd always been the quiet one, but now she was the bridge between memory and movement, between Evan and everything else. One crisp October morning, Evan stood in the sunroom reading a letter from the board of Whitmore and Cumbam. We accept your temporary leadership under the condition that a full-time CEO be appointed within 6 months. He folded the letter. Fair enough. Megan entered quietly holding 2 mugs of coffee. They want an answer, she asked. They want someone who won't cause headlines, Evan said. Then they shouldn't have built an empire with your last name. He smiled slightly, took a mug. They sat for a moment, sipping in peace. I've been thinking about selling it, he admitted. Megan turned. The company, the house. She blinked. You're serious? Evan nodded. Too many ghosts, too many rooms with voices I didn't earn. Megan looked around. Maybe, but there are rooms that need new voices too. Outside, the trees had begun to turn. Leaves fell like the end of a story, slow and bright. That evening, Evan found a box in the attic he hadn't noticed before. Inside were more of Richard's letters, unsent, unmailed, unfinished. Some addressed to his children. One was to Clara. Evan hesitated, then carefully he slid it into a new envelope, added a simple note. I don't want to replace him, I just want to stop hiding behind him. He left it on Clara's front porch days later. He never knew if she read it, but she didn't return it. 2 months later, the family gathered for Thanksgiving. It wasn't at the estate. It was at Megan's house, small, lived-in, warm. Margaret showed up late, a bottle of wine in one hand and an apology in the other. Luke appeared surprisingly early with a dish he'd actually cooked, and Clara arrived, alone. No luggage, no performance, just a pie in foil and a look that said, don't make this harder than it already is. The room didn't cheer, didn't freeze, it just breathed. They ate. They argued a little. They laughed hesitantly. No one said Richard's name. But when Evan stood to clear the table, Clara quietly stood with him. I read your note, she said. He paused, and you still don't belong, she said softly, but neither do the rest of us. They shared a moment of rare mutual honesty, not friendship, not closure, but something real. As the night closed in, Megan snapped a photo of them all clustered together on the couch, slightly awkward, slightly off-center, but smiling. She didn't post it anywhere. She just printed it and placed it on the mantel the next day. No label, no caption, just the image of what remained. Not a family reborn, but one rebuilt.